What if some of the most revolutionary things Jesus taught were hidden in plain sight for nearly 2,000 years? When we talk about canonical versus non-canonical sources, we're simply distinguishing between texts that made it into the official Bible and those that didn't. The canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are the ones most of us know. But there were many other early Christian writings that told different stories about Jesus and recorded different teachings. One of the most fascinating of these is the Gospel of Thomas, discovered in 1945 in Egypt as part of a collection called the Nag Hammadi Library. Unlike the familiar Gospel stories, Thomas is simply a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus. No birth narratives, no crucifixion, no resurrection, just pure teaching. What makes these teachings so intriguing is how they seem to echo the grand, radical ideas of Gnosticism, a way of understanding spirituality that emphasizes direct, personal knowledge of the divine, rather than faith in external authorities. Today we'll explore themes that appear in both these alternative texts and, surprisingly, in some familiar passages from the canonical Gospels themselves. But real quick before we get started, if you like this type of content, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss a future video. Check out my other channel, Folks of Yore, and check out my website, oculus.com. Alright, let's dive in. Let's start with perhaps the most radical idea of all, that salvation comes through knowing yourself deeply. This isn't the kind of self-knowledge we get from therapy or personality tests, but something much more profound. Listen to these words from the Gospel of Thomas. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. Think about that for a moment. This saying suggests that the deepest spiritual truth isn't found in believing the right things or following the right rules, but in a kind of inner awakening. It's saying that when you truly know yourself, not just your personality or your preferences, but your essential spiritual nature, you discover that you're already connected to the divine. The poverty it mentions isn't financial hardship, but the spiritual emptiness that comes from not recognizing who you really are. Here's another powerful line from Thomas. That which you have will save you if you bring it forth from yourselves. This is like discovering you've been carrying a treasure in your pocket all along, but you forgot to look. Whatever you need for spiritual fulfillment, this teaching suggests you already possess. The key is learning how to bring it forth, how to actualize and express this inner divine nature. Even in the familiar Gospel of John, we find Jesus saying, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." While this verse has been interpreted many ways in traditional Christianity, from this inner wisdom perspective, it's pointing to the same thing. Liberating knowledge comes through direct spiritual insight, not just intellectual belief. These teachings flip our usual understanding upside down. Instead of needing to be saved by someone else, they suggest we need to wake up to what we already are. The second theme takes this even deeper. The idea that there's literally a divine light or spark within every human being. This isn't just poetic metaphor, but a fundamental truth about human nature. Remember Jesus' famous words in Luke. "Neither shall they say, Lo here or lo there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you." Most of us have heard this verse, but have we really absorbed what it's saying? The divine realm isn't somewhere out there. It's already present within our own consciousness, waiting to be recognized. The Gospel of Thomas puts it even more directly. There is light within a person of light, and it illuminates the entire world. If it does not shine, there is darkness. This suggests that each of us carries something like a divine flashlight. When we learn to turn it on, when we recognize and cultivate this inner light, it doesn't just transform our own experience, it literally illuminates everything around us. This teaching offers us a completely different way of thinking about spiritual life. Instead of seeing ourselves as fallen beings who need rescue, we're invited to see ourselves as beings of light who have simply forgotten how to shine. From this perspective, the spiritual journey becomes less about fixing what's wrong with us and more about remembering what's right with us. It's about learning to recognize and nurture this inner radiance that was never actually absent, just temporarily hidden. The third theme might be the most mind-bending of all. The idea that spiritual awakening involves transcending the way we usually think in terms of opposites. Listen to this extraordinary passage from the Gospel of Thomas. When you make the two one, and when you make the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside, and the above like the below, and when you make the male and the female one and the same, then you will enter the kingdom. This sounds like a riddle, doesn't it? But it's pointing to something profound about how awakened consciousness works. Instead of constantly dividing reality into categories, good versus bad, sacred versus ordinary, spiritual versus material, this teaching suggests that true wisdom sees through these artificial divisions to the underlying unity. Think about how we usually experience life. We think our inner world is separate from the outer world. We see ourselves as distinct from others. We divide people into categories based on gender, race, religion, politics. But what if all these divisions, while practically useful, are ultimately illusions that keep us from seeing the deeper truth? Even in the canonical Gospels, we find Jesus expressing this theme of unity. In his prayer recorded in John, he says, "That they all may be one as you, Father, are in me, and I in you. That they also may be one in us, I in them, and you in me. That they may be made perfect in one." This isn't just a nice sentiment about getting along. It's describing a mystical state where the boundaries between self and other, human and divine, completely dissolve. Jesus is speaking about a consciousness where individual identity expands to include everything and everyone. This might sound impossible or even frightening to our ordinary minds, but mystics throughout history have described this same experience, moments where the usual sense of separation falls away and they recognize themselves as part of an infinite, interconnected whole. The fourth theme extends this unity consciousness to include all of creation. The teaching that the divine presence isn't confined to churches or holy books, but permeates absolutely everything. One of the most beautiful expressions of this comes from the Gospel of Thomas. "I am the light which is above them all. It is I who am the all. From me did the all come forth, and unto me did the all extend. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there." This is saying that divine presence is so immediate, so intimate, that it's literally present in a piece of wood or under a simple stone. It's not that God is somewhere else looking down at creation, but that God is creation, the life force animating every particle of existence. Jesus expressed this same insight in the familiar passage about the lilies of the field. So why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. On the surface, this seems like a teaching about not worrying, but look deeper. Jesus is pointing to the natural world as a direct expression of divine beauty and care. The lily doesn't have to earn its beauty or work for its magnificence. It simply expresses its divine nature naturally and effortlessly. There's also a beautiful parable where Jesus talks about seeds. The kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed on the ground, and should sleep by night and rise by day, and the seed should sprout and grow. He himself does not know how, for the earth yields crops by itself. Notice that phrase, the earth yields crops by itself. The divine force that creates growth and transformation isn't something imposed from outside, but an intelligence inherent in life itself. The farmer doesn't make the seed grow. He just provides conditions for the mysterious divine process that's already happening. This perspective invites us to see the sacred everywhere, in the morning coffee that warms our hands, in the face of a stranger on the street, in the simple act of breathing. Nothing is too ordinary to be holy. The fifth theme might explain why these ideas didn't make it into mainstream Christianity. The notion that spiritual truth requires a kind of secret knowledge available only to those ready to receive it. Jesus himself, in the familiar Gospel of Matthew, explicitly talks about this selective teaching approach. And the disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He answered and said to them, "Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given." This is striking. Jesus is saying that he deliberately conceals deeper meanings from the general public while revealing them to his inner circle. This isn't because he's elitist, but because spiritual truths can be misunderstood or even harmful if received before someone is ready. The Gospel of Thomas makes this even more explicit. It begins, "These are the secret sayings that the living Jesus spoke, and Didymus Judas Thomas recorded. And he said, 'Whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death.'" The very premise is that these teachings contain hidden meanings that require interpretation. It's not enough to just read the words. You have to discover what they really mean through your own spiritual insight and experience. Later in Thomas, Jesus says, "It is to those who are worthy of my mysteries that I tell my mysteries. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." This suggests that even within a single person, some spiritual knowledge needs to be held carefully, not broadcast to every part of our personality. This might explain why these teachings feel both familiar and foreign. They're pointing to truths that resonate deeply within us, but they're also challenging some of our most basic assumptions about reality and spirituality. They require not just intellectual understanding, but a willingness to question everything we think we know. These teachings invite us to consider that perhaps the most radical spiritual message isn't about believing the right things or performing the right rituals. Maybe it's about recognizing the divine light that has always been present within our own consciousness. Whether these passages reflect the historical Jesus' actual teachings, whether they emerge from later spiritual communities, or whether they represent universal spiritual truths that appear across traditions, they offer us something precious, an invitation to see ourselves and our world through completely different eyes. They suggest that the kingdom of heaven isn't a distant realm we might reach after death, but a present reality we can access right now through the simple act of truly seeing who we are. They point to the possibility that every moment, every interaction, every breath is an opportunity to experience the sacred directly. These teachings don't require us to abandon our existing beliefs or join any particular tradition. They simply invite us to consider, what if the very thing you've been seeking outside yourself has been with you all along? What if the spiritual journey isn't about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you've always been? Perhaps that recognition is what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. Perhaps it's what the mystics of every tradition have pointed toward with their words and their lives. And perhaps it's available to each of us right here, right now, in this very moment. Thank you again for watching. If you would like to support the channel, there's a Ko-fi and PayPal link pinned in the comments and in the description. But the easiest way to support is to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Check out another history channel I'm involved in called Folks of Yore. The newest video on the daily life of a medieval alchemist is great, so check it out. Until next time.